everybody. Welcome back to our 1:30 presentation, where this is kind of the presentation that I really love this conversation we're going to have. Most of you know that Cup of Excellence is about the farmers, and it's about creating opportunities and discovery for farmers. But if you really think about it, you don't have buyers, if you don't have people to buy the coffee, if they're not willing to join your mission, if they're not willing to put their heart into what it is you're doing for farmers, you might as well pack your suitcase and go home. Because without companies like this, without the supporters that we have in the marketplaces, we have no hope at all of changing any of the situations in producing countries. We have no hope of discovering great qualities. We have no hope of creating coffees that consumers are like wowed over, because they won't be available, because there's no reason for farmers to produce them unless they have buyers that are willing to pay the price for them and sell them. So today, and I know that it's very difficult, being a marketing person myself, it's very difficult when you've got a nanosecond to talk to a consumer about why they need to pay more for their coffee. It's difficult to do that. And yet these 5 companies and people have been able to do that. And so today we're going to have a conversation with them. We're going to ask them how they did it. How did they separate their company out from the noise? What they have done to be successful, because each of them is successful in their own way. So, Synøve has been on a jury many, many times. Kaffebrenneriet has supported Cup of Excellence for, well, 2002? Yeah, forever. I mean, I know forever. And so she has a little bit of a different view of how things have been set up. And I want to start with her, one, she's the only woman on the panel. And so I want to go there first. And I want to ask her how they have been able to create a process and a company where their baristas actually act as their ambassadors. What is it about their educational program? How do they motivate their baristas so that when Synøve buys green coffee, they get excited and sell it to the consumer? Right? So I'm going to start with Synøve and let her explain how they have done this at Kaffebrenneriet.
Okay, Kaffebrenneriet is a coffee bar chain in Oslo and located there with 44 stores now. But back in 2002, then Steinar, one of the founders of the company, went as a jury member for Nicaragua. And he went on the jury, and when he came back to the company, he was thrilled, excited, and said that he has been part of a program that let him cup together with fellow cuppers, meet producers, and taste coffees in a new and different way. And he was really thrilled about the procedure of the cupping, which was transparent, easy to understand, and gave him a new perspective, and met farmers that he would never ever meet going to Nicaragua by himself. And when he came back home, he said that this is a wonderful program. It gives quality in the cup, and I think we're going to aim for buying from this auction as soon as possible. So that started out with 2 first coffees from Nicaragua. And the way that Steinar and Thomas, the founders of the company, work is that when they have a good idea and they want to run with it, they looked at me and said, well, you should go to Cup of Excellence in Bolivia in 2004 to experience the same program. Because when I started in Kaffebrenneriet as a part-time barista, I was going through teaching college. And soon after a couple of years finishing teaching college, I became a manager for a store, and also was asked to build the training program for the company. And my joke is always, when you are the only teacher, you're going to have all your ideas put to test, and no one will question your ideas. And I was sent to Bolivia as a jury member and got really thrilled, fell in love with the program. And I didn't understand that the reason why these Thomas and Steiner sent me, they knew that if I got the same feeling for the Cup of Excellence program, it will then start merging into the training, because I met all the baristas in our training program from day one. And I think it's such an honest program, and it's easy to explain to the baristas how it works and why we would like to buy these coffees. And the baristas, they own the program in a way. They think that this program is easy to explain to customers. It's easy to make customers excited. And they started to storytell the Cup of Excellence program to the customers every day in the stores. And that's why we are saying that they are our ambassadors, because they trust the program, they understand the program, and it's easy for them to explain to the customer why they should choose this cup of coffee. And it's like a snowball effect. I mean, in the company, when the baristas are talking about coffee, they will explain how good it tastes, how different they are, how unique they are. And the Norwegian customer will taste the coffee and buy the coffee due to the taste in the cup profile in the cup first. So I think the success story for us is that we have founders that really love the program, understand the program, and we spend a lot of time teaching baristas this program. So we have, in the company, we have a trained scheduled program for all the baristas. They're going through different levels, and the first training program is 7 different courses they will do mandatory the first 10 months they work, and one of those courses will be Cup of Excellence training, cupping, understanding. So we're marketing Cup of Excellence as one of the subjects they are being trained in the company. So there you have the ambassadors.
Wow.
Yeah.
As Synøve just mentioned the founders of Kaffebrenneriet, I want to recognize Thomas, who is here as one of the founders. Okay, so we're going to switch over to the U.S. now. We're going to go over to Nolan, who is Proud Mary. How many of you have heard Proud Mary is pretty famous? Yes, exactly. So the interesting thing about Proud Mary, and the interesting about a phenomenal cupper and person all the way around, is that they have been able to promote and sell some extremely high-priced coffees to their consumers. I mean, just like record-breaking high-priced coffees to their consumers. And they can do it in a way where nobody really blinks. It's like, yes, I get this. I get this is really important. But it's also interesting for Nolan because he comes out of Australia, which is a little bit of a different coffee community. And he's also got, he came in Portland and started Proud Mary in Portland, is now in Austin, Texas. And if there's ever a dichotomy in the U.S. between Portland, it's Texas. I would love for you to comment on not just how in the world do you get those coffees out there sold, some of the highest quality Cup of Excellence at such a high price, but also is there a difference in those marketplaces and how you create loyal customers?
Well, it's been really special to have the brand of Cup of Excellence as a way to promote these coffees. And particularly, I remember early days in Melbourne, in Australia, that customers would recognise that as a brand and they would see Cup of Excellence. And it started a little bit of a frenzy between us, competition with some of the other roasters, where we're like, hey, who else can get a Cup of Excellence winning lot? And how high a lot could you get? And in Australia, it was quite difficult for us to get into the top 5 winning lots. So they really were expensive and hard to reach. And sure enough, there was an audience for it. And I kind of think this is one of the funny things, is that we are the ones that limit what something is worth. We kind of don't give things a shot. I'm moving to Portland, Oregon, and I remember someone saying, "Oh, you you can't sell coffee for $10 in Portland, can't I?" Okay, and there it is, and it's on the menu, and we just started selling so much coffee for $10 a cup north, and there really is an audience out there that does want something special and delicious and is willing to pay for it. They just don't even know it yet, and we need to kind of get out there and put it out there. Moving to Austin, Texas, I feel like Peter Pan. Honestly, I feel like I kind of get to redo these like new markets and excite customers. And the big price tag on a coffee right now, we would probably some of the COE lots. We were lucky enough to buy the winning lot from Honduras, and it's so delicious. It was an amazing Pacamara. And so cool to see this big jammy Pacamara. So, I mean, personally, I'm really excited about the program in these coffees. That has a lot to do with it. When you fall in love with something and you share it with the staff and you create a program where the staff can come into that, it's very easy to trickle through into the customer. That coffee is $17 a cup on the menu, which, years ago I thought there's just no way that we could do that. But people don't really bat an eyelid at it so much anymore. I feel like it's, if anything, it's exciting. There's an opportunity to spend money on coffee, particularly when the coffee backs it up in the cup. And I became such a fan of the program, of how hard it was for these producers to get into the top 30 because of the ruthless rules around what would be kicked out. Anything showed up that was not right, it wouldn't make it. And when it came time to an auction, there were many auctions where I'm like, well, I actually haven't had a chance to cut these coffees this year, but I really want one. And I trust in the panel that if it made it into the 10, they're all ridiculously good. If you get into the top 5, they're going to be phenomenal coffees. And so we actually, several times, happily purchased coffees from Cup of Excellence, really not having the same in-depth experience of being at Origin and cupping them, and have only had really good things to say about it. It's been really fun, and I really, it's, if anything, it's so magical, the program, that it can be hard to put into words. Sometimes it's too much to explain, and it's how do we boil it down into a small, bite-sized bit of information for the guest. I love it. I recently went to Honduras like 2 weeks ago, and I had a tin of the winning lot, and I have this little information card on it, and I'm an hour away from where this producer was. I'm like, hey, can we go to the farm? And we went there, and I hadn't realised, but I had seen that coffee in Melbourne 12 years ago. He had came third place, and a competitor had bought that lot, and it was a delicious coffee. Anyway, I was really enjoying getting to see the farm, having a look around, and I really wanted to go back to his house and like, hey, can I brew some coffee for you? And I pulled out my Comandante and showed him, like, hey, have a look at this. And he's like, oh, I've got one of those. And I'm like, what do you mean? We're in Honduras, and sure enough, winning lot, he had this Comandante surprise, and it was this beautiful moment of unboxing the prize. He had not opened it or looked at it really, and then going through how to use it, and we shared a coffee in the house. The kitchen had been expanded thanks to the money that earned from winning, and so cool to see just firsthand where this money was going and the joy on their faces, and it's really cool. It's a program that I'd love to support, and it kind of makes it it does make it easier to sell those high price tags. I think we just need to put it out there, and particularly now, thanks to George and some other people out there really innovating with how we store coffee. I don't have so much fear over having some really special coffees in the freezer and with a really high price tag, and knowing that when we get to it, it's still going to taste delicious. And so that's been a big help also.
Cool. George.
Thanks, George.
Scott Connor owns Carbo Coffee, and he has seen, boy, Cup of Excellence from all kinds of different venues. I remember when he was on his first jury, now then he became a head judge, so he's seen it from both sides, you know, knowing from all the way from pre-selection when you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds through this and through this and through this, all the way up to the international jury, and then became a buyer, and so then was faced with consumer. How do I get the consumer to reward what the coffee had to go through? So I would like to ask Scott to talk to us a little bit about those different viewpoints, but also about the company's relationship that they have in the focus on farms and producers, and how Cup of Excellence has impacted that.
How much time do we have? No, I'll try to boil this down. Such a great question. Okay, so a little bit about the synergy of my company. You put on the roaster retailer hat and talk about the farmer direct relationship program that we started. So we're tracking roughly the same age of the program with my companies, and my intention at the start was almost exactly, if not just fully similar to what Cup Excellence is trying to do, at least in the terms of building relationships and creating a real sustainable path to quality that is long-term. And that really started with buying a Cup of Excellence first. So that's what I did first and early on, because I recognized what the program was doing, but hadn't been a part of it yet. So my first introduction to it really was the quality of the coffee and knowing maybe a little bit about how that came to be. And then, as you said, immediately thought I should get on one of those juries and find out for myself, what is this event? How does this actually happen? How did that coffee get to me? And it's pretty mind-blowing. We've already touched on it a couple of times that I'm a scientist as schooling, so I like to see process. I like to see how things are organized and having a good data set that gets you to a final answer. And that's what we do, right? We're doing an amazing review of vetting these coffees. So I was pretty immersed myself, getting into more and more international panels. Loved the opportunity to be able to be part of directing that search for these coffees and finding that true synergy of this is what I wanted to do for my company. This is what we're doing through Cup of Excellence. There's so much the same, but the impact is much bigger with Cup of Excellence. And I can do more positive things by continuing to develop this program. And there's so much impactful to not just we're buying coffee and we're selling coffee and we're hopefully creating a better industry and raising the platform for what coffee can and should be, but we're impacting people and lives and families. And I think that is obvious when you become part of the program. The idea that we're interacting and we're able to see each other as people as opposed to maybe a part of a bigger industry. And then it becomes part of trying to figure out how to tell that story. As Nolan said, it's a big story. And there's many facets, and I think we probably all do a little bit of all of the different aspects. But it is about education, and it is about combining education and marketing and making sure that that story, that information is told, and the heart of it isn't lost. That we're actually trying to make the industry better through working with people directly. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes. Shortly, I will ask for some more. So we're going to move back over to Europe and go with Amir. Amir, his company difference is different. He's probably the only company that buys Cup of Excellence coffees and puts them into pods, Nespresso pods. But he also has a focus on Michelin restaurants. You don't have a retail store of your own. It's all what we would call the very challenging wholesale, which is very challenging. We all know that. But for some reason, Amir, he's been able to focus on 5-star Michelin restaurants. I remember driving in the car in Montana, and on the radio was a press release, or the radio announcer came on and said, the most expensive coffee in the world we've ever seen is $50 a cup at the Mayfair Cafe in London. And that was a coffee that Amir had happened to buy from Ethiopia. And I mean, I'm in Missoula, Montana, and it comes on the radio about, I wonder why this coffee is this expensive. And so I would like Amir to touch on not only why you put your highest priced coffees into pods, how you get it into restaurants, that story about the Mayfair, and then restaurants are challenging. They're just challenging. And some recommendations of how you get some of these really, really top quality restaurants to focus on coffee, not just food.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with the end. There are many people that want to spend $50 on a cup of coffee. There are many people that want to spend $100 on a cup of coffee and more. Yesterday night, I went to a 3-Michelin star restaurant, and we asked to do a pairing, just a glass of wine for one of the courses that they had. And they gave me and a friend a glass of wine, and on the bill it was $150 for two glasses of wine, and it's kind of like the normal stuff. That's what they give everyone. So people want to spend on coffee, people want to spend on wine, people want to spend on cars, people want to spend on lots and lots of things if they believe that they are the best, if they believe that they are the finest. So a little bit of background into Difference and how it came about, because it was a bit of a mistake. Difference Coffee came by accident. So about a year prior to setting up Difference, I wasn't a coffee drinker, I was a tea drinker. In fact, I didn't really like coffee because I found it overly bitter. And my wife came around one day and said, Amir, let's buy an espresso machine. I said, what for? I don't drink coffee. She goes, it's not for you, it's for me. So I don't argue with my wife over 100 pounds. We bought an espresso machine. I thought, I don't like coffee, but maybe there's something to it. So maybe I should start drinking all the different capsules and see if there's anything that tastes better and so on. So I went through all of them, didn't sleep for about a week. And I kind of got a little bit into it. I was drinking the coffee with sugar. I didn't want to drink it with milk because I didn't kind of think that, you taste the coffee. But slowly, I developed kind of an understanding, I suppose, sensory understanding of coffee. And I started going to restaurants and ordering coffee there. 99% of the time, the coffee in the restaurant made by wherever it is that did it, from freshly ground beans, supposedly, was worse than what I had at home coming from an espresso capsule. And it didn't make sense to me, because you would think that if you've got something that is made with care from beans and so on, it should taste better. But a lot of the times it simply doesn't stand the test of tasting it. So one day I was curious, and the curiosity came about from kind of like, when I think about anything that is tasty, I wonder what's the best. So the question is, what's the best coffee? Now, I've heard of varietals like Kopi Luwak because of that film, The Bucket List, and Jamaica Blue Mountain because it's got so much heritage. And but I never got the opportunity to try those coffees because they weren't available in a capsule. In fact, when I went to restaurants or hotels, they weren't available even in hotels and restaurants. And I thought that's kind of interesting. So the only way I can try them is if I go to a store and buy the beans and become a barista and so on, which I didn't want to do. So one day the curiosity got the better of me, and I went to Harrods and I bought some kind of coffee. Kopi Luwak was too expensive. It was 2,000 pounds a kilo. So I put that aside. I bought some Kona. It was only $200 a kilo. And I bought 100 grams of it. And I bought some empty capsules and I filled them up and I put in the machine, press a button, and out came a drink which was substantially better than what I tried so far from a capsule in espresso, which made me kind of think, you know, that's a good idea. There are so many people that have an espresso machine, but they don't have access to tastier coffees. So why don't I just buy those better coffees and provide that accessibility to people? The only problem I had is I didn't know anything about coffee. I knew I wanted the best, but I didn't know what it meant. So, you know, doing a bit of research, you find that you do have scoring systems for coffee. SEA scoring systems, you've got excellence and so on. And you've got coffee competitions and auctions and so on. And, you know, that became quite instrumental in creating different coffee and buying those particular macro lots that are very, very high scoring. Now, in terms of now going back to restaurants and so on, they want a better product. They want to make more money. You know, a restaurant that sells a tasting menu for $300 a head and a bottle of wine for $200, I mean, you'll end up spending $1,000 for a dinner. So what difference does it make if the coffee costs $5 or $20? It's still going to be the cheapest thing on the menu. And they know it as well. So we, to hospitality clients, we sell capsules. We can also sell beans. Some of them we do sell beans. But ultimately, it's the same thing. It's about knowing that they have the clientele that are prepared to pay more if they know, if they believe that what they're buying is the best. And Cup of Excellence is a perfect platform for coming and saying, look, it's not about me. It's not my own personal preference, some of the coffees, but this is the best coffee from Mexico, and this is the best coffee from Guatemala, and this is the best coffee from Brazil, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you can delve into processing, you can delve into varietals, and so on, because those are things that people outside of our community and our industry, they don't know anything about it. I talk to so many people that say that they are coffee snobs. They're snobs that like coffee, but they don't really know anything about coffee. So I think that Cup of Excellence gives a great kind of like education, but also gives a great product that is quite easy to sell. So we bought Cup of Excellence Ethiopia, and I went to one of the coffee shops that we used to sell to, and I said, why don't we sell that as a special coffee? We only have, you know, a box of 30 kilos, so once roasted, it's 20-something kilos, not a lot of coffee. Let's sell it for 50 pounds a cup. So we put it on, did a little bit of PR, and it reached Montana. That was it. I mean, it's not rocket science. People will be prepared to pay for something which is tastier. That's it. Simple as that.
Well, that's not quite simple. Thank you. Okay, we're going to switch back over to another multinational, Ricky, who is in Salt Lake. Ricky is Idle Hands Coffee Roasting in Salt Lake City. And, you know, Salt Lake would not necessarily be what you would consider to be the hotbed of caffeine consumption or coffee or anything like that. And yet, he has been able to create a small roastery that has supported Cup of Excellence, that buys Cup of Excellence, that brings in customers when we show up to do presentations. And so I'm going to turn it to you and say, because so much of the specialty industry now looks like you. It looks like the guys that are starting up small, that are coming from the ground level going up. And from your point of view, how have you been able to hit the ground running? Why do you support Cup of Excellence? How do you support Cup of Excellence? How do you get that marketplace to come in and be so excited?
Oh, thank you, Susie. I think we're a little bit blessed or a little bit lucky with just the size of Salt Lake City. It's got that smaller kind of market that we're able to connect with a lot more intimately. So we're able to host those cuppings and visit the cafes that we supply in Salt Lake City we just purely wholesale coffee. But in Salt Lake particularly, we put on a lot of public cuppings for people to come and attend, and 9 times out of 10 they're the sample sets from Cup of Excellence. People are aware of Cup of Excellence in Salt Lake City, despite it not really being synonymous with coffee. And I think that being a little bit aware is that kind of elevator pitch to quality, and people understanding that, oh, it does pay more for farmers. It is a high quality product decided by numerous amounts of people. And so I think them having the ability to come and participate in those cupping sessions we put on has been, yeah, kind of integral to them latching onto the kind of Cup of Excellence program within Utah. So that goes back to me being also in Australia, followed Nolan's footsteps over here. But I used to work for an Australian company in Australia, and they would also put on those kind of cuppings and everything. They were heavily involved in Cup of Excellence, so my own education with the program has been something that I've been able to kind of draw inspiration from and, yeah, share with all of our customers, both in Salt Lake City and as far as New York or Colorado or Wisconsin. A lot of I think the simplest way we've found to do it is public cuppings or community cuppings, because they were once seen as like something that was unachievable, kind of gate-kept a little bit. So putting on these cuppings of Cup of Excellence coffees for people to come and try before the auction, and having them kind of suggest what they might like is always helpful when they see that, oh, they bought that coffee that was really good. Like pre-advertising for the coffees as well.
Let me ask all of you guys. Do the rest of you do public cuppings where you bring in both? I'm a consumer.
Sure, I actually think it's a really good point of public cupping. I mean, to me, it's part of the community, and it's bringing the community in. And I do think there is something really special in coffee that is people in it. And the more we can bring the community into it, it's really important. And it does a lot for the staff. So having staff involved in a cupping, it's really it's quite hard when you just have one cup of coffee to compare to anything. When you start seeing all these different varietals from a place and then understand a region, it really gives you such a great map of something. For a consumer to be able to have that experience is so special and so eye-opening. And as you say, it gives them kind of a bit of a, oh, I might really like to come in and get one of those if that's what you're going to buy. Yeah. I love it. We kind of made a point when the market got quite a bit harder for us in Australia in the last few years, and COVID and everything else. We made a really big point to, hey, we need to bring back the cupping. We need to bring back this community cupping. It needs to be a regular thing. It used to be for us every Tuesday night in Melbourne, and it was because I lived there and I wanted to share as much as I can, and we would have 50 to 60 people every Tuesday night. We've gone back to a monthly cupping. For sure, there's 80 people coming to those cuppings in Melbourne, and it just speaks to how hungry people are to taste and share and be involved in something. And yeah, it's really special. We did an Ecuador COE cupping for Austin recently, and same thing. It got the community excited about these really amazing coffees that otherwise you might not get to share. Yeah.
Do you do public cuppings as well?
Yeah, we do. I think that we think about it in a couple of different ways, which a lot of people already touched on, which is cuppings or tastings, depending on the audience. A lot of people do like to learn technical and want to know what the industry is doing. So cuppings are fun for them and a new thing for them to learn about the coffee industry itself. Tasting sometimes to be a little more approachable for some of the consumer side. But we start with staff, and we make sure that those are the most frequent and deep informational, because we want to get them excited about it because they're the ones who are going to be selling it on a daily basis. And then we're back to monthly as well. We'd love to be more than that. We're getting there. I think everyone's relearning how to come together as groups. And we get a lot of excitement from sometimes one side of, I heard about this cupping thing and I want to learn about it. Oh, and you have special coffees you're sharing. And some people are just there for the coffee. They know about COE or they want to learn about COE. And we've been doing this long enough that they know to look to us. So we sort of see it as a responsibility too, both for what we're trying to do internally, but also for the program.
So now I want to ask you, I mean, you do public cuppings, but I've been in Oslo for Coffee Day.
Yeah.
And I want you to just talk a little bit about what happens during Coffee Day and the relationship that happens with the farmers that you buy. Sometimes they kind of...
Just a few pointers about consistency, which I think is really important to mention, is that we have our company's strategy is to always make sure that we have Cup of Excellence on the shelf for the customer to buy. And so that's been the strategy since 2002 and to this day. So the customers are now getting, slowly and steadily used to always see those exclusive bags on the shelf in the stores. And that's important because we have an average of 16, 17 different varieties you can buy. So always have that consistency of the Cup of Excellence bag on the shelf is crucial because it takes a few years for customers to get to know the program, understand the program. So with that consistency, we have an open door to cupping with customers. But I think the black coffee that we serve and sell in the stores every day is the moment where the customer actually probably will taste the Cup of Excellence coffee for the first time. And to serve regular black coffee like we do every day, we choose 2 different types. So you can come in as a customer and ask the baristas, which one do you recommend, or can you explain a little bit about these 2 coffees you have? And they will be the same priced coffee. So if you choose the high-end Cup of Excellence coffee to taste, you will pay the same price as one of the others we have, but they are in, get into the store is different scenarios. But that moment when the customer tastes the Cup of Excellence coffee, they got that sense of the quality instantly without knowing that the wholesale bag on the shelf will be more expensive to buy. But then you lure them in. They will taste the coffee, they will love the coffee, and if you ask them for a recommendation, they will, buy the coffee that they tasted, and then they understand the full concept of the program. So the big coffee day that we have every year in September started out like trying to give the customers, our salutes back to them, saying thank you. So the big coffee day every year is the one day a year that we also hand out a lot of free sample coffees. And that will be the moment when the customers, if they're really lucky, if we have a producer visiting, they will actually be served the coffee by the producer, which is really having the rock star in the store. And the customers will then drink the black coffee, understand the value of the product because they tasted prior and get to know the coffee, which someone will ask us, why do you do that? It's pretty darn expensive way of serving you a black coffee. But we know that that will intrigue the customer to understand the value of the tasting they experience when they taste it, because they trust their own palate as well, because they will know and taste the quality in the cup. So the big coffee day is just one day every year, but it's the day that we always, tribute the customer with excellent coffees, taste coffees, and hopefully they will meet a producer. Like Arvin Juniors, his son came to us and I pulled him with me through like 25 stores during one day, just, use him as, if you want to ask the producer a question, this is the moment to do it. And the Norwegian customer and the baristas love the honesty and the ability, to ask the producer themselves, which is really interesting for them. And the storytelling for the baristas is one of the most important aspects we have, because young baristas like we have, approximately 360 of them, they will not accept the fact that we just have coffee. They need to understand the story behind, they need to learn about the producers or the country or the bean or whatever we can feed them with information, because it's storytelling for them, because they will recommend the coffees for the customer, and they will pull down their 3 different storytelling for the customer. It could be the direct trade we do with any producer. That's the Cup of Excellence program. It's so easy for them because it will give them all the extra cool facts about the coffee. And baristas, they would like to present that story as well. And it makes them feel like they're selling a product with, all the extra values to it. It's really crucial for them. And we have one concept store that we do open cuppings every week for like half an hour for those who would like to come and cup coffee. And a lot of customers will think the protocol is difficult, or it's, and someone finds it really intriguing to try. And for Cup of Excellence, we use every single auction and all the coffees that we get to roast and then have open cuppings in our company for managers, for district managers, for administration staff to taste the coffees prior to auction. And we do a blind cupping as well. So when we decide which one to bid on the auction, it will most likely be the coffee that 7 or 8 of us really, really enjoy. Because if we buy those we really enjoy, that's going to sell a lot in the stores. So it's a triple down effect. I mean, in Kaffebrenneriet today, 38% of the administration that work in the company are trained cuppers and do Cup of Excellence, like jury members. And in the leader group, 80% of us have been or are active jury members. And I think the trickle down effect to the baristas, when I do training with them, I explain how we as a company experience the joy of traveling to origin, being part of the Cup of Excellence, meeting producers that we buy from. That gives the honest feedback to the baristas that feels like they also know the producer. And I think it's crucial for them to sell the coffee. So that's the success story. And it sounds kind of, wow, easy, but it's an everyday effort to work that to happen. And it started in 2002, and it continues because it's like, it's a cool thing to marketing together. And we are not afraid of letting anyone know that this is the Cup of Excellence bag we bought. This is a special label on it. It looks exclusive. It's all on the shelf, and it could be a different country next time. So just to brag a little bit, since 2002 until this day, I have a list with me, 2.5 pages. We bought 160 Cup of Excellence lots. So that's an average of 7 each year to hand out to the stores. And that's what we have got to do, to say to the customer that we have Cup of Excellence on the shelf every day, all year round.
That deserves a round of applause.
And I want to ask you a practical question about you're trying to get a restaurant to pay umpteen more money for their coffee. How do you go in and present that coffee? Is it just they taste it and then it's all good? Is it farmer? How do you do that?
Okay, so the hardest part of converting a restaurant client to purchasing better coffee is to get a meeting. Right? Because if you manage to get a meeting, then presumably if you buy better coffees, they will taste better and you'll want to buy from you. So the hardest part is, trying to get a meeting. And like I said, being able to come and say, look, we have, if you take every single roaster in the world, every single coffee company on earth will say that they buy the best coffee. They'll say it in different ways. Nespresso will say, only 2% of the best coffee in the world we buy, and Starbucks will say something else. Everybody will say that they're buying the best. Nobody is buying bad coffee, by the way. Everybody's just buying the good stuff. So if you can come and say, look, we buy the best and we can prove it to you, that's an interesting conversation, because then they're intrigued. Now, once you come in, you can go and give them different coffees to try, and then they'll have a sensorial experience that they've never had before. Because again, most of them would be serving commodity coffee. Most of them would not have heard of specialty coffee, So it's all still so fresh. That's why I think there's so much potential for COE coffees and specialty coffee in general. I just think that consumers don't know enough about the work that everybody in this room does. So really, there's so much more potential for everyone to succeed.
So I want to ask anybody in the audience if you have any questions. We have a couple of minutes. Anybody have any questions?
You're just starting out as a member. Ask some nuts and bolts kind of question. For me, as a bit of a smaller roaster, and actually back to Nolan's point earlier, we try to cup. We have the top membership level. So we do receive all the sample sets, and we attempt to cup all of them, but don't always get around to them. And sometimes we, might have a bit of a small gap in our menu where it's like, this would be perfect for a cup of excellent winning coffee, and we will sometimes blind buy it. And proof's kind of in the pudding. It's always amazing when it arrives. We usually budget across the span of a year that we want to buy this many COE coffees. So one every quarter or one, whatever it may be, dedicate a menu slot to Cup of Excellence rather than it replacing anything else in our menu.
For me, it's always been like a curiosity. I would be like curious, how good can Honduras be? How good can Mexico be? And Ethiopia, Ethiopia, okay. Indonesia, it kind of, there's an excitement around it. And so I would just, we have to know that maybe, and it's not always every country or origin that we would get after, but I would usually pick something that's piqued my interest and excitement, and then really like zone in on that. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, so we kind of have, I guess, different opportunities of how to sell coffee, because it's really, and we figure this out the hard way. Like, I was thinking back while we're sitting here, the first COE coffees that we purchased, and I remember the moment I was in Guatemala, and my style was like, I'm just going to put a proxy bid on. I'm going to work out what my maximum amount that I could spend on this, and I put a stupid number on it. And I woke up in the morning and I'm like, oh crap, we won the whole lot, and it was a really big lot. And so I did. I put in a slightly higher price tag and sold it as a next to our regular blend. You could upgrade if you want to try this. But since those days, now we have developed a program where we would have a subscription program, and in that subscription program for deluxe coffees, we can spend so much per pound. And once it goes beyond that price tag, it can't fit in that subscription program, but we could have a special release, and it's harder to predict how much of that you'll sell on the price tag, and sometimes it can be, we bought a really expensive coffee, and we've got a fair bit of it. What do we do? And again, thankfully, we've gotten better at storage, and so we're less panicked about moving through it so quickly. We want to take care of it, and I think that's kind of where we landed with that. It really helps to have marketing materials as well, and for that menu to have something to look at, or to hear the story, or to show that. Yeah,
I think there's maybe something that correct me if I'm wrong, but how to get into it if you wanted to purchase yourself, right? So I remember when I started buying Cup of Excellence, you really had to go and buy the whole entire lot. And now today you can join a buying group and just purchase one box of 30 kilos. And 30 kilos will net you 20 something kilos of coffees, which is not that much. So it's great, there's an opportunity to to come in and to just choose one program and to just buy literally as little as one box and to try it and see what it's like. And my experience in terms of which ones to buy, up to a few years ago, you had a little bit more variety. Today, it's, all lot one. If you want to buy lot one, they're all kind of like issues, but technically just look for something different to everything else that you have, so you can give more variety for people. I think that's a nice way of looking at it. but it's really, really accessible. The way that Cup of Excellence this year have shaped its membership is such that it really isn't very expensive. It's only a few $100 to become a member, and then afterwards you just buy any set that you want. So you can buy as little as one set. So it's really, really accessible, and I think that a lot of people think that it's only like really, really expensive coffees and you have to spend thousands of thousands to get accessibility to it, and it's really not the case anymore. It used to be a little bit more at the beginning, I think, but I think that now it's a little bit, it's much easier for everybody to, there's no excuse for people not being able to get one box of something.
The good news is you can't go wrong.
Following up on Amir's experience with restaurants, obviously, experience, I can imagine experience also coming to restaurants and making great quality coffee, but then you're with the brewing method. Not all have the best brewing techniques, even some coffee shops. So can you share a little bit more of your experience on which works best for the restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, when we come to a client, we basically will offer them anything that they want. We have started, like I kind of shared the history behind my brand. So it started off for capsules, but technically when we went to restaurants, if they wanted beans, it actually makes our life easier because it means we can just roast it and we don't have to put it into capsules, right? And I even came to restaurants and said, look, let's create a program with it with one restaurant.
Yeah, so we're talking about green coffee mainly in that question, right? That was George has had way more experience than I have with freezing green, but my understanding has been some great results. You know, it has only been a good thing. There's some learning in that for sure. The sooner you freeze it, the better. I remember conversations we had, George, where you were saying that you want to get it into the freezer before it starts to show any signs of age. So the quicker the better. When I refer to freezing, often I think more so on the roasted side of being freezing. With the green side, I also now like to use a temperature controlled room, and so I'm not always freezing the green these days, but I have no problems doing that, and it definitely works really, really well for special lots. George, I want to say once it's been frozen, I mean, there was a couple of different things that I remember us talking about. One was you did have some experience roasting from frozen, and had some oddly really good results. But what we were doing typically would be to defrost and then roast, and just what we need. Not in Melbourne, we're lucky enough to have a big walk-in freezer, and so you could actually scoop out what you needed to defrost, and then once it has come to temp, we would roast it. What else was there on that? How long would it last? I think, wow, I mean, you mentioned what type of freezer. I mean, if I had access to deep cycle freezer, absolutely, it would be amazing. I know Flavio Brem was doing studies with that in Brazil, and they were really ultra low temp freezers. And then if you also had the ability to blast chill first, that would be gold standard. But freezing in general is still going to be better than not, in my opinion, and letting something get old. And depending how you sealed it, if you sealed it really well, it was vac sealed, I think you get a really long period of time out of it in the freezer. That's not what I've been aiming for, I guess. It's more to preserve the quality for longer, as opposed to vintages, But there are definitely some people that have been holding on to special coffees to share later on. Yeah. Yeah, George got plenty to add. it's such a challenge. That's why we all love coffee, right? It's like we're constantly trying to capture those really special coffees and protect them and preserve them. And there's a few things to point out, like you mentioned, even just picking the coffees and how you pick coffees and what we're looking for. And I do think, like personally, I feel like there's a responsibility to help do the steer the right direction for quality. Like, what does quality look like? What is it that defines like something special? And we have had all this crazy experimentation around fermentation and different things, and then had some really horrible experiences in that, where the loss of quality has been really significant, especially in travel and roasting and extraction. And it's been the last 5 years maybe has been a lot to navigate. And I think trying to preserve the terroir, the provenance of varietal, and what is true to the plant and where it's from is obviously like really important. The good stuff that came out of some of that experimentation, from my opinion, was learning ways that we could create better of a rail system or parameters to be more precise in how we go about things. And if anything, I feel like we've gone back to some more classic ways of doing things, but with more control and understanding about what's happening. I would love, I mean, if we could ship coffee frozen or cold, then I would feel way better about insurance or money on coffee, that it gets there okay. Air freight for sure. I think usually the biggest challenge for me is getting it to us without it seeing a loss. Once we've got it, I think, also you have to roast it well, age it well, extract it well. But there are numbers that we can put on things, and I think be technically correct to that it was roasted, to the right degree, and then also extracted to the right degree. And actually, what water are we using? How are they doing it? Yeah, I mean, it's often, well, not always, but it's often a learning experience for the customer too, where something that higher price tag, there's something about this, and we haven't said it, but I think it's really tangible, is that when you go buy that $150 glass of wine, I bet it was a freaking delicious glass of wine. Sure. So it was $75. It's still expensive, right? It's a lot of money, There's something about spending money on yourself, treating yourself, that helps create this special experience. I don't like that we undervalue coffee, that we don't really charge what it's worth. We don't really celebrate how freaking special it is. We all know how much work goes into it. It's a lot. And when you put the right price tag on it, people fall in love. They have a really special experience because there's kind of this real desire to celebrate it.
Not only does he have them, sorry to interrupt you, but I get to experience them. So I'm the one buying those cups of coffee from him, and they're really they're a wonderful introduction. And Nolan already said this before. It's a complicated story. It's a lot of information. He's opening the door with. Let's talk about this coffee. I'm going to share a few things with this coffee. Here's a little note card that goes along with every service, and I have no doubt your staff has been trained well to talk about the coffee. But I know they talk to me about the coffees, right? And I think every successful program has that as its basis, that you have to have an energized staff that are knowledgeable and able to have those conversations. Not everybody wants to have that conversation, right? Not every customer is interested in even some of that detail. Forget about all of them. But you have to be prepared for those, for it to be successful, so that you can capture that when it's possible. And we've heard a lot of good examples about sampling and how that's an opening door, but you got to be ready for the next step and being able to hand out more information or have a conversation about it. But I think the goal is to highlight what's special about that coffee, right? And that's what we want to make sure we're doing, sort of being true to the coffee as opposed to trying to change it to become something different. And every story is probably going to be a little different. We've spent the decades of our company training people to trust us to do that. I think that's part of the story too, is you're constantly sort of selling that story or telling that information or getting to a point where people trust you. And they're not going to question anymore. Like, this is a great coffee, here's why. Okay, I'll try it.
So